Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to welcome you to this video presentation regarding environmental epidemiology and exposome. Human life is exposed to environmental hazards both internally and externally. And for world, exposome is the sum of all the exposures from conception onwards, completing the genome. And for Martin Voyaged, the early life exposures can be catastrophic. And that's exactly why she came with helix, human early life exposures. All this, whether it is helix or Hercules, the exposome intends to encompass and in fact encompasses all exposures during life cycle from conception. And nothing left behind, nothing left aside. All exposures. In terms of environmental epidemiology, exposome can be useful if environmental epidemiology or any environmental epidemiology, people don't consider only some factors, one or two factors, but they take into account all environmental hazards, both internally and externally. Then researchers' findings might be complete, and also solutions might be adequate. Not only we have exposures, all kind of exposures, but health disparities is another problem that makes the case worse. Health disparities can be explained by the fact that some groups of the population, some categories of the population, some people are underserved, underprivileged, because where they live, the job they are doing, and also, of course, their income. That's why I have very low income people. These people are vulnerable because they don't have access to health coverage. They don't have access with health care. And they live in area that they can afford. And most of the time, these areas, they are very poor. And they are risky in terms of pollution and toxicity. Now, how exposure can help reduce health disparity or health disparities? Well, exposure can be useful as public health authorities who are talking now about public health exposure decide to use exposure theory model integratively. That's mean environmental hazard, externally, internally, everything combined together, all the exposures they can find in it. I mean, in Exposome, the conceptual framework to identify, to compare what they find in one area to what they find in another area. That might help them localize or locate, identify at risk persons, at risk groups, disparities communities, and help them also to have targeted interventions. For Gary Miller and many other scientists, environment is a greater malleable effect. Environment has a greater malleable effect on health and well-being of people. And that's exactly why Martin Vregen et al. Comes with the helix human early life exposures as something very critical at this stage of life, because that can cause uh, body structure, physiology, and metabolism to change permanently. Health disparities make the problem worse. In a report from CDC, a second report of CDC for 2013 on health disparities, we read that uh, minorities have a lot of problems because they can live only, they can afford to live only uh, close to in residential areas, close to the highways, close to heavy motor vehicle traffic. That means they are exposed to carbon dioxide and other stuff like this, CO2 that cause a lot of cancer or asthma or other chronic diseases. So when we say health disparities in the United States, we see minorities, we see black people, we see most Hispanics, we see uh, people from Asia, people with very moderate income or very low income, and those people are more vulnerable because they don't have healthcare coverage. They don't have health coverage. They don't have healthcare. So, and most of the situation when you hear about crisis, epidemiology, or kind of environmental hazards, tragedy, mostly these things happens in uh, minorities communities where they live, where they work, and where they play. And that's why when we consider exposure, exposome want the public health authority, public health to take to consider all the exposures and any environmental epidemiology, so that we can have a complete research, complete findings, and adequate solution. Until we do that, problem will be solved, but not completely. Or also, we can be misled because when we don't have the right information, correct information, or complete information, solution cannot be correct, solutions cannot be right, solutions cannot be complete, they cannot be adequate. So to do that, we need to take into account all the factors That's exactly what happened. World wanted to draw attention to critical need for complete environmental exposures data in epidemiology study. So complete environmental exposure data in epidemiology studies. That's exactly what World wanted. So why? Because Exposome can provide conceptual framework which can be used to identify and compare relationships between different levels of exposure at critical life stages. So either at helix, human early life exposure, or Hercules, perspectives, personal health outcomes, health disparities or population, level across place where people live. Exposome can help localize at-risk persons, at-risk groups, at-risk groups and health disparities communities in order to have targeted public health interventions. So that's basically what it is, and that's basically how Exposure can help in environmental epidemiology to reduce health disparities. Thank you so much. See you again in the next video. My name, Varlet, Philippe. Thank you. Bye.